as a kid, I guess I was doing all these things that were leading me into when I was going to find flow. As I started performing, I'm like, oh, wow, I know this feeling. And I'm listening to REM and like, okay, I can make it. You know, I'm like, all right. Then you get there and I'm like stoked. I'm like happy to be there. And then I would walk back home and that would wipe me out. I would literally be like wiped out for the day. They can be taking the right supplements, eating the right foods, but if they don't sleep, they will not lose weight. 145 pounds and worked out and stuff, I still had this little belly, right? I'm like, why do I have this belly, right? That you don't want to keep doing forever. You just need that to jumpstart something, maybe to boost the hormone reaction. You know yourself better than anyone else. All you can do is describe, your symptoms and your feelings to someone else. And I'm like, oh no. So I start tapping my brakes again because it worked before. I'm like, oh great. I'm like, oh no, here she comes. I can see her. And bam. Well, I started meditating. Maybe why I sought the validation and the verification from biofeedback is like they may be 40 and they've got, problems of a normal 70 or 80. She's like, are you all right? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Are you all right? I'm like thinking to myself, I play soccer 3 times a week. I'm like in great shape, I'm fine. But the next morning I couldn't move.
Tell me about, just how, active, you guys were in terms of, sports and all that, those physically.
Yeah, I was always in sports. So when I was a young kid, I played soccer. Later, like I wrestled in junior high, cross country. In fact, my soccer coach made me run cross country because he wanted me to have more endurance. So sports wise, also I played tennis junior high and high school. Was on the swimming team. I didn't like that. So I swam, but I was like, this is boring, right? I was like swimming in a lane. I'm like, I can go in a lake and swim wherever I want, right? To me, that part just didn't make sense. And it's been the same way with even working out, right? I'd never liked working out. So luckily I liked sports. So that when I was done with high school and even when I was in college, I would drive back during college every weekend. Even if it was a, party night on a Saturday at IU, I would get up early and drive back to Indianapolis to play indoor soccer with my buddies that I'd played soccer with forever. And so I liked that community. I liked the activity. I know that later what I probably craved was the dopamine and the adrenaline and a lot of those things that I was so used to that I know if I didn't have it, I would really feel bad and feel not like myself. Intuitively, I must have known that because I don't know any other reason I would have gotten up after like 2 hours of sleep and, drive hungover to Indianapolis, right? And I'm listening to REM and like, okay, I can make it. I'm like, all right. Then you get there and I'm like stoked. I'm like happy to be there. But that's flow. That's actually that state I was craving. I knew what was going to happen when I got there. And so, as a kid, I guess I was doing all these things that were leading me into when I was going to find flow as a healing method, which is how I found it. As I started performing, I'm like, oh, wow, I know this feeling. I love this feeling. This is, in fact, how I learned it was when I was talking to one of my friends about only being able to basically every morning, I look forward to being able to walk to the grocery store or the, Walgreens that was like half mile from my house. But I had a rope tied to my headboard and my footboard because that was the only way that I could get out of bed. And then if I walked that far, in fact, I'd like rest, but it was also my social time. I could talk to some of the people there while I got my stuff. And then literally I would like catch my wind and then I would walk back home and that would wipe me out. I would literally be like wiped out for the day. I know at that time I didn't know what I know now about supplements, but my parents have always been into natural methods and eating really healthy things organically. And my dad even has been taking supplements. And at that time I was taking, but I hadn't found out anything about DNA nutrition or genetics or any of the fun stuff that I get to play with now and figure out how to target those things and get the best results, especially for specific things that are happening, as well as just that the whole body kind of changes, right? And so you can even be needing and having something that helps you or isn't a catalyst to start a reaction that you don't want to keep doing forever. You just need that to jumpstart something, maybe to boost the hormone reaction. And so those are a lot of the things that I've learned as I've kind of tested everything on myself. And that's actually what everybody needs to do, right? They tell you to be a patient advocate. Your best experiment, but you're also your best doctor. You know yourself better than anyone else. All you can do is describe, your symptoms and your feelings to someone else, and then they're trying to interpret that, compare it to all the stuff they've seen before, and then give you a result. You said, this is probably what I think it is. So, and you're still the one that has to know, how that works and how you can kind of make that happen. So at the time I was like 32 years old. So I was, had just gotten married, was getting ready to go to Brian Setzer concert. And I was like, oh, wait, I need to get this stuff from like the hardware store that was right up the street near Lafayette Square. So I'm like, I got plenty of time. I'm going to just run up there real quick. I pull up to this stoplight that has like 40 people at it. Normally it's not that busy. And I look up, the lady behind me is coming and not paying attention. And I notice that, and I tap my brakes, and she's not stopping. And I tap my brakes again, and I'm like as far as I can go, and I lock them up. Then I'm looking, and she slams on her brakes and comes up and just doesn't hit me. Like, oh my God, I can't believe she didn't hit me. Wow, great. Light turns green, start to go. Again, it turns red before everybody gets through. There's like one person or two people in front of me, and I look up, and she thinks this is not going to be red, right? She's not paying attention. She's actually looking in the back, like turned around doing something, I can tell. And I'm like, oh no. So I start tapping my brakes again because it worked before. I'm like, oh great. I'm like, oh no, here she comes. I can see her. And bam. So she even hit her brakes right before she hit me, but she hit me. And when she hit her brakes, it ducked her car down. And so it accordioned the whole front end of her car, like her car was totaled. But I had a big Explorer. So it did like almost $1,500 worth of damage to like my bumper and the whole back end of my car. But my buddy called me. He's like, hey, you're coming to the concert. I said, yeah, dude, but I just got rear-ended. Now I'm on my way home. But, this lady she had her cat. So she was returning her parents' cat to them after a vacation in the car and didn't have a carrier. And so the cat was in the back doing stuff. And so she's turned around trying to mess with the cat, right? And didn't even see until just all of a sudden, the last second, she thought to turn and then slammed her brakes on and hit me pretty much full force. And but it also probably the way she hit down, it jacked me up higher later on, thinking about like why it was so traumatic. But yeah, I thought I was fine. I got out of the car and I'm like, she's like, are you all right? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Are you all right? I'm like thinking to myself, I play soccer 3 times a week. I'm like in great shape, I'm fine. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry I was doing this. I'm like, oh yeah, it's great, no problem. I'm like, exchange stuff because obviously we both need work done. She can't drive away. And so I was like, oh great. My buddy calls and I tell him what's going on, and he happens to be a lawyer, and so he's like, he is experienced with this, but I think it's because he's a lawyer that he's telling me, oh dude, how's your back feel? Is your back all right? And I'm like, oh, my back's fine, dude. I'm like, I play soccer. I'm okay. I'm fit. And the next morning I woke up, like we went to the concert. I danced all night, never felt any pain that night. But the next morning I couldn't move and had to end up like I went to a therapist, I went to physical therapy, actually went for full 12 sessions, was still in lots of pain and I wanted to be back at 100% what I was before. I expect to be back to normal. I was also an athlete. So like every time you got injured, the body fixes itself. It's magic. So, I'm waiting for the magic, baby. It's like, I know this happens, right? Like, and it wasn't happening. So the guy was really cool. He had actually owned Broad Ripple, like physical therapy place. And he ended up becoming a doctor later. But he even petitioned my insurance company because they didn't want to pay for more physical therapies so that I could get an additional 12. So I did like 24 instead of the normal. That's their recipe. You can have 12. No matter what you have, you get 12. Oh, you've got stuff that didn't fix, but you only get 12. So, if we're going to not help you anymore, so we're creating other problems and expenses for us and you. But, that's the kind of stuff that the big picture stuff you start to see and understand. A lot of times, at first I was angry about those kinds of things when, you start figuring it out. And then you figure out later when you get wiser that you're really angry at yourself because of the bad decisions that you made, regardless of the fact that you have bad information. You chose to listen to the bad information and you chose a bad decision. And so that's where you start gaining the responsibility and the ability to make the magic happen at will, by kind of figuring out that the body can heal itself, but you have to give it the right ingredients, and the right time sometimes, patience, some rest, which I didn't really understand that part of it then either. And now I realize that rest is like one of the biggest components. Like people can be working their ass off for workouts. They can be taking the right supplements, eating the right foods, but if they don't sleep, they will not lose weight. They even can't build muscle right if they don't sleep. So all these athletes and what college kids that I knew, were partying and they weren't sleeping and the coaches were getting them up early, but the kids were not smart enough to go to bed early. And they didn't do whatever recovery sleep, they were the ones that ended up with injuries and problems when I look back at it. Because I lived near all the guys from IU that were the basketball players. On my dorm floor, there was like 12 football players. My roommate was a baseball player. The next year, my roommate was a tennis player and a wrestler. So I've been around athletes and, understand that problems that people eventually have. And even now, as I've been working with people, it's amazing how many of the athletes just are destroyed. Their bodies compared to a normal person that, didn't have those things is like they may be 40 and they've got, problems of a normal 70 or 80-year-old person. So yeah, it's pretty fun. Then I used to have just tons of inflammation in my gut and stomach area that was always there after even like 3 years of supplementation, then switching to specific ingredients that were made for fat loss. That part within like 2 months. In fact, actually, like I had this hump belly that even when I was like 145 pounds and worked out and stuff, I still had this little belly, right? I'm like, why do I have this belly, right? But then, boom, literally like that part went back, went down. I'm like, I look in this, I'll be walking see yourself in like a reflection, be like, oh, wow, I'm actually like standing straight and I don't have this like thing sticking out. And it's weird to notice that transformation happened when you kind of didn't, it's happening. And I realize like even as we measure things that, it's getting better, but it's kind of weird to reflect back and see the huge gap that in like 7 years I was, able to make. Well, I grew up on Morse Reservoir. So it was a lake that you could go do basically anything at. We skied and did this thing called like a boogie board or a hydroslide type thing that was behind the boats. But I can just remember like every day going out and my mom when we were younger if we'd get our stuff done, I think that was her motivation to get us to do chores, was if we were done with our chores, we could go to the beach. So they had like a pool with a little beach next to it on Morse Reservoir. And so every day during the summers, I remember that's what we would do. So I was always swimming or, doing something, fun. Even back then, I remember, when your parents didn't want you to do or to bother them, they wanted you outside getting exercise, basically. They didn't call it that because they didn't think that way, right? There was like, we want you to go outside and be a kid, have activity, get tired. So when you come in, you won't be all around here, right? Luckily, we didn't have like video games and phones to suck us into that place. But that was basically childhood, was playing at the lake. I loved swimming. We played dock tag all the time as a kid. In fact, I think that was one of the things. So when I was young, we took martial arts from like age 7 to 14. I started with Taekwondo, and that's the one that I liked the most. I also eventually started taking Hapkido. But in Taekwondo, I got up to a black belt. And so I really enjoyed that part of it, especially a lot of the mindfulness things that we did. What's really cool is I didn't know that's what we were doing. Like as a student, they didn't teach me that that we were going to be doing mindfulness exercises, right? They're like, you're going to practice your form, but you're not going to do your form. You're going to sit here while other people do their form, but you're going to close your eyes and you're going to visualize what you are doing the form. And so you could hear them doing it, you could hear them saying it, and you're visualizing yourself doing it. We're actually practicing visualized guided meditation and also some other cool like kind of tricks that were helping with neuroprogramming the body's ability to perform then that form that I've now studied. So those are the cool things that like you don't realize that you're learning when you're that age. But some of those things that I did, I think, are the reasons why I started meditating. Maybe why I sought the validation and the verification from biofeedback, because it felt so easy. But it also felt like it should be working faster, right? So I'm like, what am I not getting? What other parts do I need to know